On this episode of the CEO Activist podcast, I'm joined by Paul Gerrard. We're going to be learning from Paul why he believes that the intersection between business and the government have such an important and crucial role to play in today's modern world.
Paul, take us back to the beginning and the early days and tell us a little bit about any of the early childhood experiences that informed the role that you're in today.
So I'm from a typical working class Lancashire family, strong Catholic, strong Irish roots. Very fortunate to have a really close family. In fact, all my extended family lived within walking distance of where we lived. Really strong figures in my mother and father and siblings. I'm the youngest of five. And I guess those, my early years and schooling were shaped by having really powerful people around me, powerful in the sense of helping me be the best that I could be. My mother in particular, my late mother was a very strong influence. I had great teachers at primary school. And I think I was fortunate to live in a very tightly knit community, very tightly knit. I think it taught me that actually we got on as a community, we prospered as a community, as an Irish Catholic community in Lancashire, because we did things together, because we helped each other. You know, I knew all my friends, school friends' parents. I knew all my school friends' siblings because they went to school with my sisters and siblings, played in the same football team, we were in the same scout troop, the same guild club. We're a very tight-knit community. And I guess the biggest lesson it's taught me is that if you're part of a community, you can achieve just about anything.
I love the centralization almost of community, the fact that now, having had those early experiences within the community, whether it be the religious community, the local community, family community, that now that in the role that you play to these days. Talk to us a little bit about how role community plays out in the role that you do. It's quite a unique role, isn't it? Quite an unusual one in the context of British business.
It is. I mean, the co-op, lots of businesses will say we are different, like unique, and I'm sure it's true. It is constitutionally true for the co-op. The co-op is owned by its members. You can only ever have one vote in a co-op. You can't buy more shares to have more votes and get control. It's a democracy. That's quite unique. Being member-owned is unique. And I think the heart of cooperation, the family was in the 18th century for the Rochdale pioneers in 1844, was that essentially you achieve more together than you do on your own. And I think when I look back at my experience as a child and growing up, as a community we prosper because we use the assets that different members of that community had. You know, whatever they may be, but by coming together, you can move on. And I think because the co-op is member-owned, it means that my job is quite different. So most big businesses will have a public affairs director. I spent 20 years in government. I know how government works. I know how parliament works, how politics work. I've got lots of great colleagues in other big businesses who are also public affairs professionals, absolutely. The uniqueness for the co-op, though, is that we don't only use that voice for issues like business rights or regulatory burdens. As a co-op, we use our voice with government and with politicians and with parliamentarians on issues that matter to our members. So we have campaigned on the issues of slavery rights. We're campaigning on the issue of climate justice and its impact on global south. We've campaigned on issues like loneliness. And in a sense, having that voice on both commercial issues, classic public affairs issues like every other public affairs profession in the country, but also being a real campaigner and advocate, someone who puts the views of our 4.6 million members in front of those who make decisions. That is quite unique. It's quite a privilege. And I think it reminds me that the other thing I learned as a kid is about loyalty and respect. And what I mean by that is you give back to the community that helped raise you. You know, so as a co-operator, we give back to our members, and our members give back to each other. You know, it's a reciprocal relationship between members in a cooperative. It's why we are genuinely a unique form of business.
You articulate the point around business and government and the importance of those working hand in hand. Obviously, that's one of the reasons we formed the CEO Activist Council. And I wonder whether you could talk to us a little bit more about why organisations should care about their counterparts more so these days, the way that you do and the team does at the Co-op.
So I would say I'm a bit of a political nerd, so I find it all really interesting. What I would do, I'll observe 20 years. I think over the last few years, particularly during the pandemic, businesses suddenly realised in very short order that government, through Parliament, can affect their business in a quite fundamental way. All businesses knew that, but it tended to play out in longer time. During the COVID pandemic and lockdowns, it actually happened in days. Businesses were prevented from trading, and therefore the impact governments through Parliament have on businesses is quite palpable. And I think that has made businesses think more widely. Let's start a lockdown. What are the other businesses, the other relationships they have with government? I think what businesses sometimes fail to realise, as I say, civil servants in civil service 20 years, is that the expertise and knowledge, the insight that businesses have is unique, and government love to have access to that to help shape policy, and that policy will impact how businesses can go about their activities. If I look at, if you get 25 CEOs in a room, each with 20 years experience, each running businesses at £5-10 million a year, you can do the maths. You've suddenly got hundreds of years of experience at the top end of business, running with hundreds of billions of pounds of revenue and hundreds of thousands of colleagues. If you don't get expertise from that, and if you can't draw it out, civil servants should be civil servants, politicians should be politicians. So I guess the thing that slightly frustrates me is sometimes businesses don't realise how they can help government make better policy, both for them as a business, but also for the people that they serve, for the Co-op, for our members.
When you talk about that amount of knowledge, you talk about that amount of people, but also the amount of money going into the economy, the fact that government and businesses can be shaping decisions, impact the future generations, especially given times of turbulence, the economic environment that have been through things like COVID and the likes. It is so fundamentally important that we galvanise these organisations and businesses against the storms that are ahead in order to protect the livelihoods of the communities, as you mentioned when we started out.
And look, if you want to go somewhere worthwhile, you go with other people. You just want to go somewhere quick, you go by yourself. And I think, again, I'll come back to my own upbringing, but also the idea of cooperation. You'll get a better result if you cooperate. Now, businesses are successful by being competitive. That's how you succeed in the business. But there's some things you need to cooperate on, and there's some things that you need to share. And I think some of our experiences in the Co-op, particularly around our campaigns, where we have sought to bring together businesses. If I think about the campaign we ran on short worker violence, safe communities, in the end, the last open letter that we wrote to the Prime Minister, and the government did act on this, they changed the law, we had 102 retail CEOs sign that. Now, getting one from the Co-op, fine. Suddenly did 102 sign. Suddenly government going, hang on a second, this is important. So I just think working together on those things where you need a common answer. I think for those things where there is a shared outcome, absolutely. That doesn't mean you're not competitive. And, if I look at the Co-op's 118-year history, there was a point in the past where we were the biggest food business in the country, and the biggest food business has ever been in this country. And we did that because we were really a good business, competitive business. We're still a Co-op, and we're aiming to be a successful cooperative business in the future. That means being competitive for our members, providing value for our members, but also where we need to provide leadership and working with others.
You talk a lot about some of the early influences in your life, in the community, and how collaboration has really shaped the leader that you are today. You're also famous for having a stutter, which I absolutely love. And I think it's endearing, and I think it's also something that is very unique to you. Talk to us about how difference and diversity helps to drive success.
I mean, I do have a stammer. I know members of my family have a stammer. I wouldn't say it's anything that's held me back. I think it hasn't held me back for a couple of reasons. One is my mum had a stammer, and she refused to let it hold me back. I remember very distinctly the first time I spoke in public, which was in St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church in Anderton, and I was doing the first reading in St. Paul. I want to say to the treatise were mad wrong, but it's that I have fought a good fight, I have a good race. And I was quite nervous. I was 8. And my mum said, really simple, Paul, you prepare for it, you then pick a point in the church, and then you shout the first word. Right? Great. So I went in, I stand up to do the reading. Every person I know in the world is in that church, including the fellows at the back with the hangover from Saturday night. So I think, right, so I focus on the Lord, sang the lecture, and I shout the first word. So tomorrow I realised that I was light up. So when I shouted the first word, it deafened the whole church. But I got attention. I guess my point is, what my mum taught me was that if you work hard enough, things don't have to hold you back. That's the first point. The second point, though, was more about mum, which was a role model. Didn't hold her back. It didn't stop her doing what she wanted to do. So why would it stop me? And I think what I've done is probably gone into the worst job for someone with a stammer. Could do lots of public speaking. My job is to persuade people by talking to them. It's not great if you have a stammer, but in a sense, the more I prepare, the harder I work, the more I think through, the less I stammer. So I also think that the experience I've had, there's been some times where it's been a bit crap, and there's been some times where it's been quite hard, and people have picked up on the fact that I'm stammering in a not very constructive way. They have given me a set of experiences which, as a member of leadership team, you can bring to that, and you can bring to the sense that some people might not want to speak for different reasons. It might be cultural, it might be because they have a disability and stammer, whatever it may be. And you just got to make sure you create an environment that allows them. Because if you do, you get, I'm not saying me, but you get the best out of the people in that room, and the best talent in that room. So whether it's disability like a stammer, or it's your gender, or it's your ethnicity, or it's your sexuality, it doesn't really matter. Can you create environments where all those people can be as good as they can be? Because that probably means you're going to be successful.
I love that story about the church. I think it's just hands down. And I don't mind me picking up on a small piece that you mentioned there, which was sometimes people have maybe been not particularly constructive. And as leaders, I think one of the challenging pieces is that you're putting your head above the parapet. You're always going to have those moments where people want to throw stuff at you, or you're dealing with challenging questions and queries, and we're always going to get that. How do you find your way when coming up against challenges, or how have you got through points in your career where not everyone has agreed with the line of persuasion you put forward?
I think it's a point about resilience. You've got to accept that sometimes not everyone will agree with you. Not everyone will like what you're doing. So there's a resilience point. I think there's also a point about honesty with yourself, that says you might think something is right, and you genuinely believe that. Maybe you're coming up against people saying no. You've got to understand why they're saying no. And it may be that you think they're wrong to say no, or you maybe think it's vested interest, or you maybe think they're trying to protect something. And there's negative reasons for that. But understanding them allows you then either to say, no, I'm right, or say, you know what, I probably need to change a bit as well. And I think there was a time, I think it's changing now, where leaders couldn't say, I got that one wrong. Because if you say I've got that one wrong, it means you're weak, it means you're sexual. I still think, of course it does. But I think the willingness to be open and say, perhaps there's a different way to the way I'm doing it. That's helped. I led 7 years, I led 10,000 people in the civil service who deal with tax credits and child, 10,000 phenomenal civil servants. And there were times they didn't agree. I used to meet 600, 700 a month every month. And there's times they didn't agree. There's times it got a bit fasty. That's all right. That's all right. As long as there's still there's a respect there and there's a constructiveness there. Feisty is good because feisty means someone gives a toss. And that's a great place to start. The worst place is where no one cares. And then you've got a real problem.
It's a really good point, because I think often in British culture, we have this almost allergic reaction to wanting to be disagreeable. Yet at the same time, we talk a lot about diversity, we talk about the innovation of thought that brings about, and ultimately the correlation that has then to productivity and to positive profits and things like this. But actually having that disagreement, or having disagreements in the boardroom, I'm sure many of us can think about those times where we're all trying to put our point forward across the boardroom table, but actually those differences of opinions are what we require, because otherwise everyone is a yes person. And like you say, there's no passion and desire in the outcome per se.
I think one of the worst forms, one of the worst things in an organisation is that groupthink. Everyone thinks the same thing. You need voices in the room, so I don't agree with that. And I can think of times in my career where there's been someone who hasn't agreed with it. I think creating the right environment so they can say that is really important. And having the opportunity for them to make the case is really important. It doesn't mean you do what they say, or the group doesn't, but the group has challenged. Think, well, are we right? I think if you don't have those voices, you get into an ever smaller echo chamber where you're just hearing people who agree with it. It's one of the worst things about some forms of social media. They're just echo chambers, and that doesn't really help. I read a wide variety of newspapers. Some I agree with, some I don't. But I read them all because I want to know different people's points of view, because that's what diversity of thought means. I don't agree with some of them. I've never agreed with some. I never will agree with them. But I want to know why they think like that. I want to know what it is they think will happen. And then I can make memory all that. You've got to be open to information and facts, because when facts change you.
So facts, figures, hearts and minds, all of these things culminated are what is required to move the needle in the right direction. Well, I wonder whether you could talk to us about what you believe business leaders, but also perhaps politicians, can do when it comes to putting the S in ESG, as we like to say.
I think I was on a panel a few weeks ago about social mobility, and it was interesting listening to some of the professional services organisations like KPMG, who I think have done some phenomenal work over the last 50 years in a sector that's traditionally very graduate. The pathways in those organisations tend to be very graduate. I think KPMG has done some amazing stuff. What's been at the heart of all of it for them is understanding the data, because unless you understand the data in an objective way, then one of the plans you build on that are going to change with the wind. In government, I saw lots of policies developed based on what politicians thought rather than what the data said. All that means is that they just swing with the wind. So I think the first thing that businesses have got to do is really understand the data that's looking at them, understand what it means and what it doesn't mean. I think if you do that, then you're going to build better policy. I spent a long time in policy and civil service having deep control. You've got to have your data. You've got to have your understanding and your insight. Then you can decide what thing you're going to tackle rather than what thing you think you need to tackle.
I know lots of people, myself included, who will be overwhelmingly pleased that you have been talking about how great data, analytics, facts and figures are. And I think that is one of the issues that you alluded to before, is this world of media today is understanding all the different arguments or headlines from different points of view is key, because so much emphasis is placed on points of view. And unfortunately, as we've seen in certain political contexts, that's not great for society. Just having opinions framed as facts and figures, truly having the data and the research with which to make informed decisions is key. Which areas do you think businesses could be looking at specifically when it comes to managing and measuring data and facts and figures?
I think what the last few years has shown us is, I will get to the question was sort of framing. I think the last few years have shown us the structural inequalities in this country that may be to do with ethnicity, may be to do with gender, may be to do with geography. If you look at the life expectancies for young people in certain communities and geographies, they are different than others, and that can't be right, actually. I think what businesses should be thinking about, because this is where I think we can play a hugely important part, is in tackling those structural inequalities. We heard a lot in the last few years since the 2019 election of levelling up. Not it's a political phrase. Before it was levelling up, it was structural inequalities. It was about geographies. Levelling up as a concept isn't a new concept, it's a new phrase. And I think what businesses should be thinking about is that they are often the anchor institutions in communities, whether it be their big businesses or small businesses. And I think, what role do they play in those communities so that they are investing in those communities, not extracting from them? So I think there's a role for businesses to play to think about how they support communities to prosper. I think too many businesses will often just see communities and geographies as places to extract profit from. That's, of course, absolutely right for a business. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm disagreeing with is that the way you do that means that you can also invest in communities. I would say the Co-op do this well, absolutely. Think about other businesses that do some amazing stuff in communities. I think businesses need to recognise their role as an anchor institution in communities, number one. Number two, government need to work out that actually the answer won't always come from Whitehall or Westminster. I spent 20 years as the man in Whitehall. The man or woman in Whitehall is not going to fix this on their own. There was a lot to be praised in the levelling up paper that the government did a couple of years ago. The one bit I was really disappointed by is that it didn't envisage any real sense a partnership between government, local or central, the third sector and businesses. If you want to help communities prosper, and businesses have got a critical role to play in that, alongside governments, alongside civic society. I think that's something that government need to recognise on what more than they do. I think businesses need to recognise that that's a role they can, and I would argue should play if they are serious about ESG. Otherwise, it's just another set of lessons that will change in 2 or 3 years' time.
Paul, every time we speak, and I really mean this, every single time I speak, I learn something new. It has been an absolute joy speaking with you. I've learned a lot. I know that many people will. I've already aligned here twice how important it is that there is a two-way street between business and the community. This is not about extrapolation. This is about reciprocation. And additionally, the key role that business and the government have to play in the economic growth, prosperity of our future nation, and ultimately the future generations to come, who are so very influenced, rightly so, by the impact the social aspects of diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, culture has on their lives and the part they want it to play in the work that they do, because that truly has meaning for them and certainly for other authentic leaders like yourself. And before we part ways, Paul, are there any game changers or any final parting thoughts that you have that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I'm happy to share thoughts about the game changers, others could judge, I guess. I guess the thing for me is, I think what would be really powerful is if there was genuine dialogue and collaboration between the most senior business leaders in this country and the most senior decision makers in this country, often government. That happens. It happens now. When it does work, it works really well. And we saw during the pandemic, I think, that at its best. My worry is that when we're not in a national emergency, however it was, that begins to fade away. And I think the real game changer for this country is where there's a genuine partnership between private enterprise, governments, and civil society. If you put those three together, and then you can make real change. And I've seen, what the Co-op's done, some of the work we did on slavery, we've brought together governments, charities, and businesses. You can transform lives. And I think it's that triangle that when we're at our best in this country, we achieve great things. But it has to be something that's the default, not the exception when we're faced with great innovations.
Fantastic. So businesses can do well by doing good, and we must continue to keep our foot on the gas and keep the momentum up, because this is a constant evolution. Thank you so much, Paul.
Pleasure.